Well, it's that time of year. Time to talk about the films I saw from the year 2021, all 40 of them, and rank them from worst to best, what my opinions were on 40 films released in this past year. Yes, that is right. It's time to talk about 2021 films. I won't go into much introduction on this. I think that it's been pretty self-explanatory. It was another not so amazing year. But that's not to say that there weren't films that I enjoyed quite a bit, that I would recommend, and that were interesting and worth talking about. Definitely going to be the top half and bottom half of this year's list. There's quite a few in the middle that are really just kind of hit or miss, average, won't be remembered after this year type things. That being said, I'm also going to go into a couple TV shows as well, so look for that in the middle of the list. And yeah, without further ado, I think it's time to go into the number 40 spot on my list. Let's start this off with number 40, the worst film of the year. And let me preface this part of the list by saying this is the terrible horror films section of this year's list, because the next 5 are all bad horror films. Yeah. The next 5. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of crossover in my criticisms of these movies. My least favorite out of the 5 in this tier, my least favorite film of the year this year was Halloween Kills. What to say about Halloween Kills other than if John Carpenter had a time machine, or if I could have a copy of this film sent back in time to him in 1978, would Halloween, the original, have even been made? Would he have been so ashamed that this was a legacy of his excellent film that he wouldn't have even made it back in the day? This was genuinely awful from start to finish. I think that there were maybe a couple of moments that were okay. And the saddest part about this is I hate this movie, and it's not even like top 3 worst in the entire Halloween series. Unfathomable how much they've milked this, and I do not really want to see the next one. It was really badly scripted. I think that the new characters they introduced were awful. Anthony Michael Hall especially was really bad. And not only the writing of his character, which didn't really make much sense to me, but his acting performance as well was awful. A main criticism I have of this is that Michael Myers isn't scary anymore. Do you remember that scene in the original when he was chasing Laurie Strode across the street into her house? How terrifying that shot was of him just walking across the street late at night. There's nothing that even compares to that shot in this film.
Who is it? Tommy, open up, it's me! Tommy, please! Tommy, hurry up! Tommy, please!
The only thing in this film that I actually kind of appreciated was Jim Cummings at the beginning of the film, the little sort of homage to the original, kind of explaining what happened after that film, which that kind of defeats the purpose of the original when I think about it, but that was probably the best scene in this movie. As far as other performances in this film go, Jamie Lee Curtis was awful, and I'm a fan of hers. I think she was pretty good in the previous one, but here she was like way hamming it up. The scene in the hospital where she was like trying to get out of like the hospital gown or whatever, and her daughter was telling her to stop. It was like she was like acting like a crazy lady. It was genuinely like embarrassing. Some other performances to note, Andy Matichak, who was in the previous one as the granddaughter. Her character decisions went against some of the character decisions that she made in the previous film, so that was bothersome. And then Judy Greer, I think her name is. Yes. The daughter character of Laurie Strode. She was good in the film, like she was in the previous one, but she does nothing. She has no material to work with here up until, spoiler alert, the ending, and that was kind of a rude send-off to her character, I felt. Yeah, this was embarrassing. As a fan of the original films, this was shockingly bad, and I have no desire to return to it ever again in my life. Let's move on to Don't Breathe 2. This is just inexcusable, this film. I'm not the biggest fan of the first film, but I felt that this one was a huge slap in the face to anyone who had a brain that watched the first film. because what they do with Stephen Lang's blind old man character, the antagonist of the first film, is pull an Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator 2 and have him be like the anti-hero protagonist of the second one. Like I said, anyone with a brain, that is incredibly insulting to your intelligence, because nobody is going to forget what he did in the previous film. His character was irredeemable. So I think just from the get-go, Don't Breathe 2 is just never going to work. As for the movie itself, it's a generic action film. Yeah. Up next is Spiral from the Book of Saw. You know what? I will say Chris Rock tried. Doesn't mean that he succeeded, but he tried. Oh my god. This felt like a bad TV movie with like Saw added in. It almost, like, I would describe it as if CBS were to direct it to a Saw film. The scripting here was really bad too. I didn't really enjoy Samuel L. Jackson's character. I felt that he really didn't add anything. Again, this is just a tired, just worn out franchise, and it peaked with probably the second or first movie. Moving on to the last of the, no, sorry, there's one more after this. God, this is the fourth horror film I'm going to talk about in a row. That is one that's not as popular as those other ones. It's Silent Night. This is a horror comedy starring Keira Knightley. I found her performance unconvincing. She's trying to be like a kind of quirky, hip mother character. I don't really want to go into the plot of this movie because honestly I really don't care. I turned this off halfway through because I didn't find it funny. Moving on to Conjuring 3, or excuse me, Conjuring the Devil Made Me Do It. I think this film is just emblematic of the fall of the pop horror genre, as I call it. This is a term I recently coined. These jump scary, sort of easy to view horror films that don't really have a lot to analyze about them, and that's fine. First Conjuring film is really effective, not trying to put like a message into the horror. There's no Hereditary going on here, and they can be simple. The problem with this one is that it is way the hell too simple. There's so many inconsequential characters in this movie. I found a majority of it to be boring. And it felt like a Law and Order SVU special starring the Warrens. And Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga did a good job. I think they were both pretty good, but these are performances that we've seen before in the other two films. James Wan was sorely missed here, and I never thought I would say that in a sentence, but his direction, his writing, there were a couple of tense moments in the film, but like I said, largely boring. The scariest scene in the movie was hilarious. There was a single moment that completely made the scene lose any and all tension whatsoever. Okay, time to talk about Marvel cape shit. Black Widow is up next on the list. There were awful CGI action scenes in this. Terrible explosions and stuff like that. The performances were all over the place. I thought that Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh were okay, but David Harbour was really over the top and out of place. This should have come out years ago. Black Widow should have had her own movie like back in like 2010, 2011. Next up on the list is this documentary called Rock Camp. It's a documentary. I mean, Dave Mustaine looked really bored while making it. Okay, time to talk about Godzilla vs. Kong next. This is the dumbest movie ever. Seriously, the dumbest movie ever. I mean, for crying out loud, they literally drill into the center of the earth. This film was really pushing the limits of stretching my disbelief. That being said, there is something inherently fun about how goofy the fights were in this film and how action figure-y they were. Like, you know what I mean by that? Like, it felt like a kid taking his King Kong action figure and his Godzilla action figure and just clanging them together. I will say those were fun, and the little twist at the end with a certain other classic Godzilla character was also fun. Next on the list is Army of the Dead. This is Zack Snyder's newest film besides Justice League, his version of the Justice League, which I did not watch, so don't ask about it. This movie had a great opening scene, and that was it. The rest of the film was bad. Next on the list, I'm going to lose all my credit for putting this high, but it's Free Guy. You know what? There were some funny moments in this movie. The references to gamer culture were kind of clever. I did not need to see Jack Spadicy in a freaking movie. That was really kind of jarring and Pokimane. Ryan Reynolds' humor is a little bit grating at times, but he has a little bit of charisma here and there, and the dude from Stranger Things was alright. But that's as far as I'll go in terms of praising this movie. I will say as well, I saw it in a packed theater, and the audience was very receptive to it, so that was a pleasant part about the movie that I remember fondly. The ending of this is awful, genuinely awful. Just the reference humor was so bad. I do not need to hear the freaking Star Wars theme and the Avengers theme in a movie like this. That was like someone punched me in the balls. All right, I took a little break in between to get my laundry, so apologies for that. But if you can hear people in the background, unfortunately I can't do anything about it. It's part of living in a college dorm. Somebody playing a guitar. Room right next to mine. You know what? It's part of the aesthetic, all right? It's part of the material here. We're gonna work with it, okay? All right, the next film on the list is No Time to Die, the new James Bond film. This was boring to me, honestly. I thought a lot of the action scenes were kind of awkward too. The villain, played by Rami Malek, was bad. I didn't like Christoph Waltz in this movie either. I felt that his inclusion felt really kind of bizarre and not worked in very well. I appreciated some of the more like dramatic, sort of touching moments. Daniel Craig did a decent job. I was mostly interested in seeing Ana de Armas and Lea Seydoux, if you know what I mean. That was what kind of kept me invested. Next up on the list is Luca, the new Pixar animated film. I heard people talking about this like it was some masterpiece, but I found it really forgettable. Like, really forgettable. The animation was good, I'll say that. Number whatever number it is, because I'm doing this kind of out of order. Next movie on the list, I should say, was Shiva Baby. This was not my thing. I was told this was the female Uncut Gems. I mean, I just didn't really get much out of this movie. I'm sure there's people who love this, but I just didn't really like it very much. I don't really have much to say about it. I don't really remember it too much. I just remember watching it and thinking, yeah, that wasn't my thing. Don't need to see that ever again. Next movie on the list is Last Night in Soho, the new Edgar Wright film. This thing never really came together for me, unfortunately. I really liked the soundtrack, and the first act was solid enough, built up the atmosphere, built up the world, and it also had really fun techniques to move from the present to the dream world past. I really liked the mirroring. The cuts of that were superb. Not discrediting Edgar Wright as a director, he is on top of his game, even at his worst, in the case of this film. However, the horror aspects of this film, once they start to creep in the third act, it's really disappointing. The various twists that start to come in the third act of the film really undermine any sort of messages that the film carried into that third act. The writing here was really dodgy too. There was a lot of kind of bizarre choices that I didn't really find worked, especially with Terrence Stamp's character. His character was never quite explored, and the ending to that character, I didn't know if I was supposed to laugh or what. Matt Smith's character as well is really shallow and doesn't have anything going on. They try to make him some sort of like charismatic individual. The final 15 minutes of the film were really silly, and especially the final scene of the film was legitimately terrible. So I would say this movie was just overall a really disappointing experience. It's just like a sort of like giallo-esque quality to it that I thought would be kind of fleshed out more, but that was definitely not the case. I felt like maybe Edgar Wright watched a couple of Dario Argento's movies before watching this and thought, I'll just throw a couple of bones in there and see if the fans catch on to those. Next up on the list is Untold, the documentary about the Malice at the Palace. I really just watched this because I find the Malice at the Palace to be one of the most interesting moments in recent sports history. I guess a couple of tidbits I learned from watching this was that Steven Jackson is a scary individual, and it was interesting to hear Ron Artest's perspective on the whole thing, or I guess Meta World Peace now, I don't remember what his name is now. Ron Artest's perspective on the whole thing was the most interesting. That was what I came into the documentary to kind of see. They build this as a sort of, like, you're gonna see in-depth coverage that you've never seen before, explaining what happened, and it kind of a better version of just like a Wikipedia article, to be honest. The only person I really feel sorry for in this whole situation is Reggie Miller, because the man retired before ever winning an NBA championship and worked hard, and this whole incident ruined that and his career. And the fans in this film were also incredibly annoying. That stupid idiot who ran onto the court to punch Ron Artest, trying to defend his actions, I was like, are you serious? Okay, we're getting closer now to movies that I liked more than I disliked. We're almost even at the point of the films that I would recommend. So let's start off with, these aren't films that I recommend, by the way. I'm just saying we're getting closer. Next up on the list is Censor, a British horror film about the video nasty era. There's a good lead performance by the lead actress. I cannot pronounce her name, unfortunately. She's got a weird sort of Celtic name, but she did a really good job. Yeah, the film was okay overall. I didn't really get much out of it other than the performance from the lead character and the sort of interesting kind of spin to the whole story, incorporating real-life historical events. Yeah, I didn't think the ending was very satisfying, though. So, next up on the list is Wrong Turn, the Wrong Turn sort of remake, reboot, I don't really know what to call this film. It's a good attempt at reinventing a very tired franchise. The original Wrong Turn films that came out more than a decade ago are just your kind of standard redneck chasing college kids in the woods sort of films. Whereas this is sort of try to take a different spin on it, sort of characterize these villains and give them sort of an interesting sort of dichotomy, I guess to say. I mean, it's a completely different idea than what the original Wrong Turn was. It just has the title. And it's not to say that this is like just, you know, using the title of the original film to kind of sell more tickets. No, this was written by the same guy who I believe wrote the first film. So it is kind of like what he wanted the series to become. So I'll give them some credit. There are some good moments in this film. I just didn't think it worked as a whole. There's a lot of kind of dull, clunky aspects. I didn't think the characters were well written at all. But the ending was really fun. Like, the last scene of the movie was really, really fun. I liked that. So, I don't know. This was decent, and I actually could see myself maybe returning to this one in the future. Alright, next up on the list. This one is another horror film. Another more interesting horror film, I would say. Kind of got a lot more to talk about with this one. That is the Candyman reboot, sequel, remake. It's another one of those soft reboot kind of things. I will say, getting the positives out of the way first, lots of satisfying moments for somebody who is a huge fan of the original film, especially in the literal final moments of the film. That was awesome. There were some plot elements that I enjoyed too that were kind of explored, that were kind of, I guess, subtle setups in the original film. I think Yahya Abdul-Mateen did a good job in the lead role as well. The rest of the acting performances were decent. And I also, well, besides, I'm forgetting her name. I'll put the name of her character and the actress's name on the screen right now. She did a really good job too. So now let's get into the criticisms of the film. No Philip Glass? Are we serious? The music in this movie was awful in comparison, I guess, to the original. The original's use of soundtrack is one of the most, like, clever and amazing uses of soundtrack for any horror film ever.
Believe in me. Be my victim.
Philip Glass is a god, and his soundtrack to the original film is amazing. Whereas this one, it did not add anything. I barely remember any of it, and it was like so plain and dull, and why would you get rid of one of the most unique aspects that made the original interesting? A lot of odd scripting choices as well that felt sort of like rewrites. As far as horror sequels go, this was fine. I don't really need to get into like the political sort of bent to this film. I felt like it was a little over the top in that aspect and maybe a little bit frustrating because the subtlety of the politics of the original is another one of the reasons why that film is so great, whereas this just felt kind of on the nose a little bit. But more of a problem for me were the aspects that I mentioned, the kind of stale performances, the scripting, the pacing of this film was trash too. There was like a lot that was kind of centralized at the beginning of the film and then a lot centralized at the end, but the middle just had like nothing going on at times. Up next on the list is a Oscar kind of contender this year, and that is Spencer, starring Kristen Stewart. It's a Princess Diana film, and I'll say that she carried the film. She did a very good job. Her performance was pretty captivating and commanding, whereas I think the rest of the film was pretty boring. Good shot composition, but I think the rest of the film did not really do anything for me, so...
Moving in a straight line.
God!
Perfect
That looks
acting.
comical as hell.
I don't know. I guess women like this stuff.
Hey, the soundtrack's back, though.
They've been pretty consistently good music throughout this.
Yes! Well, this, like I said, this cue is actually really good.
This kind of stuff just doesn't exist.
Doesn't in my world.
Hey, I almost forgot to talk about the tragedy of Macbeth. That should show you how interesting the movie was. No, there's a lot of really great things going on with this. The black and white, the aspect ratio, really added to sort of this, like, medieval, like, ancient sort of atmosphere I think that Joel Coen was going for in directing the film this way. Obviously, Denzel Washington is superb as usual. I mean, come on, it's a Denzel Washington performance. I just didn't find that this movie had really any rewatchability. There was good performances, great look and atmosphere, and obviously using the Shakespeare script was a nice touch, but I just didn't really find it brought anything new to the table apart from that. Here's another horror film to talk about. Next on the list is Antlers. I went into this film with zero expectations and thought that they did a pretty decent job with what they had. It's a Wendigo sort of tale, and I actually appreciate some Wendigo type movies. One of them that kind of is a guilty pleasure of mine that hardly anybody ever talks about is Larry Fessenden's 2001 film just titled Wendigo. That film still sticks with me. I remember watching that one cold winter day when we had a snow day home from school, and it was very, very good.
We want to wait here for our ride.
What's the matter?
Nothing.
Come on, what is it?
That man knows where we live.
But enough about that film. A little short recommendation for you. I think this film, Antlers, directed by Scott Cooper, was well directed. Really good cinematography. The performances in this film were decent as well. I think the kid, who's like kind of the main sort of performer in the film, he did a really good job. Really, really convincing. And I think Kerry Russell tried with the script here. She did a decent job. I think the problem is that this film just doesn't really go anywhere. There's a lot of mediocre sort of payoffs towards the end. I think that this film had a nice atmosphere. There was some subtext here and there that felt a little interesting. And this wasn't a waste of time. There was definitely some good aspects to the film, but I wouldn't recommend it overall. Next is CODA, which is an acronym standing for Child of Deaf Adults, I think. This is another one that's getting a lot of Oscar buzz. It's really sappy, it's really saccharine. There are a lot of really cheesy sort of moments to try and tug at your heartstrings. The characters do a lot of stupid stuff. I was kind of like PO'd by some of the choices made here. Like the boyfriend character especially was just ugh. But this is still a pretty good and sweet film. The ending was nice. There was some good acting from the main actress. She did a pretty good job. I don't really think it's deserving of the hype it gets, but the ending did its job. I think it was pretty good. All right, I cannot wait to talk about this one. Next on the list is M. Night Shyamalan's Old. This film, unironically and ironically amazing. Now, let's get the negatives out of the way. Yes, the acting in this film was awful at times. Yes, the scripting is so bad at times, but it's super Shyamalan.
I still can't get any reception. Doctor, before we do anything else, can you take a look at our children, please? Oh! He's got a knife!
There's a damn hole in my cheek.
Put that down right now, Doctor.
Watch out, Jared!
Listen, I don't know why I did that. I thought he was going to hurt me. Sorry. Sorry.
What's he talking about, sorry?
Let me see that laceration.
Man, that's assault, man!
Calm down. What's your name?
It's accident.
I'm not really sure if the humor of the film was supposed to be the way it is, but I don't really care. There was a lot of just great, really fun moments. This is like the least scary horror film ever, by the way. There was like not a single moment that felt like like it was like achieving the scariness that I think Shyamalan wanted it to have. But I will say, I've talked about this in other videos that I've made, that Shyamalan is a director that I have a lot of appreciation for. Man has a personal sort of effect for me. The Sixth Sense is a film that I have a lot of history with, and I absolutely love it and will love it till the day I die. So anytime Shyamalan releases something, I'm just gonna go out and see it no matter what. So anyways, I was like, I need to give this a chance, and I will say, man is making movies that are very unique, very interesting, unlike anything else, despite what you think of the content of the films. And I think that there were some uncomfortable moments that were actually like done effectively and were like actually executed well. Yeah, it's probably his best film since Unbreakable, which is not really saying much because a lot of his films recently have not been very good, and that's, you know, not saying much because I don't think this movie is amazing either. There's definitely some aspects of it that are kind of bad. But the ending of this film, holy crap, that was a great ending. I think it's probably one of Shyamalan's best he's ever done. And yeah, it's a little based if I'm reading into it the right way. But I liked it a lot, the ending. And the film was overall incredibly well paced, and I had a great time watching it. I mean, I'll probably watch it again and laugh at some of it and find enjoyable, legit moments from it the next time I watch it. Okay, let's talk about The French Dispatch, the new Wes Anderson film. Great setup, great premise, really good acting performances, some legitimately funny moments of comedy. The first part of this film, so just to explain, this is an anthology film. So there's 3 different stories that are kind of in this fictional magazine that you're watching as like parts of the film. Part 1 was great. Benicio del Toro was amazing. Léa Seydoux was amazing. Really good acting performances. There's a nice little commentary on the argument of art versus artist, which I appreciated because I find that I have a lot to say on that as well. The execution of that first part was really fun. It was a really clever Wes Anderson sort of tale. Whereas the second part was just okay, and then the third part was not great. And it just kind of deflated the whole movie for me. It's well directed. Obviously, Wes Anderson is Wes Anderson. I find that I enjoy a significant number of his movies. Fantastic Mr. Fox, Grand Budapest Hotel are great, amazing films. And then Isle of Dogs was also pretty good. But then he has also got stuff like Bottle Rocket and the Royal Tenenbaums, which I didn't really like. So I'd probably put this like in the middle between that side and this side. So, and finally, The Night House. This is the last film I'm going to talk about before I get into the recommendations portion of the list. The Night House is so close to being a really, really solid horror film. It's tense. It's got a great main character and performance. In fact, I'd even say Rebecca Hall is probably Oscar-worthy for this. The atmosphere in this movie is really good, too. There's a lot of clever setups and payoffs. The problem with this movie is that it does not stick the landing at all. The ending doesn't work, which is the opposite problem of David Bruckner's last movie, The Ritual, which had kind of awkward setups and not so great characters, but paid off and made the movie feel a lot better at the end with a great ending, which I still remember. So if David Bruckner can take the atmosphere of this movie and combine it with the solidness of the ending in The Ritual, he will have himself an amazing movie in the next one. It's just like, he's so close. Both of those movies were really, really close to being great. All right, now we're at the point in the video where I'm going to talk about the television shows that I watched in 2021, starting with what everybody would like me to talk about, and that is Squid Game, the cultural event of the year. Overall, my thoughts on it are, yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed it. It's got a lot of really, really amazing moments. The tension in the show is undeniable. The acting performances are great, especially from the lead guy. Lovely atmosphere, amazing use of the format of the show. I really, really liked how it kind of went beyond sort of a B concept that it used to kind of rope you in the first episode, and it was more of a character study by the end. I know that a lot of people didn't like the ending of the show. I personally thought it was great. Maybe the best aspect of the show in general was how effective the ending was, in my opinion, and how it kind of tied everything together in a very dark and pessimistic way. As far as any elements of the show that I didn't really like, I think that the VIPs were a classic case of a foreign show not being able to write English dialogue very well. I think that their dialogue was really bad, very noticeably bad. And I've heard other people comment on that same thing. It definitely bothered me, but not enough to the point of me kind of disliking the show or anything. It just was a little distracting. In that episode, I still really liked the game. And speaking on the games in general, all of them were just really unique and fun and horrible to watch, but still incredibly fun to watch as a viewer. The show overall worked for me. I'd give it like a 9 out of 10 or something if I could. Like I said, a couple of aspects I thought weren't amazing, but the rest of the show was just handled really well. I'd like to also take this moment to talk about the, I believe, HBO show miniseries, Mayor of Easttown. Really, really great. I think that it is Kate Winslet's best performance of her entire career. She's awesome. I think that the two interlocking mysteries in the show were done very well as well. It's kind of a unique sort of play on this True Detective Twin Peaks kind of setup. The characters are all pretty interesting, well fleshed out, and the multiple twists at the end also were very effective, and I'd probably give this show a 9 out of 10 as well. As far as other TV I watched, don't expect me to talk about freaking that stupid new Boba Fett show. Like, what the heck is that? Besides that, I didn't really find anything is worth remarking on. I watched other TV shows this year, Survivor, Top Chef, reality stuff, but nothing really worth remarking on. So let's get into now the films that I recommend from 2021. All right, let's start it off with Malignant, the funniest film of the year. No joke, I laughed at this thing for majority of the third act. I think that it was one of those cases where when my roommate and I watched it, we really weren't sure if it was intentional or unintentional in being as entertainingly dumb as it was. And the more and more I read about it, and the more I learn about James Wan, I think that it is the latter. I don't remember what order I said them in. I believe James Wan was a madman, but I think he was doing this intentionally. There's lots of very, very goofy, over-the-top aspects to this film, but holy crap, is it effective. My God, the prison scene was absolutely hilarious, and the fight in the police station was even better, and it caps off with maybe the funniest moment in a film all year. Anytime this film used the Where Is My Mind soundtrack cue as well, made me burst out into laughter. That was awesome. This was just a thrill ride of what the hell is going on, and I loved it. I think it is one of those movies that I would happily watch again in like a group scenario, because it would just be like so fun to watch with a group of people laughing at it. And I think that there was sort of an intent to have that kind of feeling with this film. Obviously, some of this movie is bad. I think a lot of the characters are not interesting at all, like the side ones. Main character did a decent job. The performance was okay, but it really is that amazing plot twist that everybody knows at this point. I'm not going to spoil it in case you don't, but that amazing plot twist that just ramps things up in that third act is A+. Next on the list is a little documentary called Framing Britney Spears, and this was a very informative documentary. I was not really aware of the whole controversy that kind of took social media by storm this year. In fact, I think that was settled this past year, right at the very end, this whole controversy. Personally, I was on the side of Britney Spears the whole time. Makes you really sympathize with her. The mass media criticism in this film was really great as well, and yeah, it was a worthwhile documentary to watch. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend it. Alright, unpopular opinion alert for my next movie in the recommendations list, and that is Matrix Resurrections. A lot of people absolutely hate this film. I've seen this film get put through the ringer online. And let me tell you, I thought it was fun. I had a good time watching this. I think it really came together for me. It's not like a perfect movie. I would put it on the tier of like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, where I could probably put this on in a couple years and still enjoy it. It's not some sort of huge piece of art. It's not some sort of landmark film like the original was, but I found this to be an enjoyable film experience. I thought that Keanu was actually really good in this. I gave him a lot of shit last year for his performance in that Bill and Ted film, but he did a really good job here. I felt like he had just enough corniness to some of the lines that made it feel like he wasn't really taking it completely seriously, but when he needed to be serious, he was. He felt like the old Neo. This was still, I think, a reasonably good movie. The two halves of this film were wildly different. Let me say that again, wildly different. I think that the first half, being the meta commentary that a lot of people have talked about, really worked for me. I really enjoyed the sort of discussion of sequels and what sequels are in a meta sense by Lana Wachowski. I think that the scripting and directing were both great on her part. The second half was basically just sort of what you would expect from a Matrix sequel, but I think they did a good job. I liked the little twists and turns the story took, and everyone's upset about the twist on the one concept from the original, and I thought that was handled well. I enjoyed that. Anyways, another aspect I liked was just being able to look at Carrie-Anne Moss again. I'm sorry. I just had to say it. Jessica Henwick, too. She's, you know. Alright, so next on the list is Pig, starring Nicolas Cage. This movie was labeled as a sort of John Wick thing, and it still is, and I really don't understand that at all. It is a very, very solemn, like sort of very slow drama that's supposed to explore this main character Nicolas Cage plays, and he's amazing in it. It's probably one of the best performances of his career, maybe the best, honestly. He gives his all here. This film also has the best scene in any movie out of this year, the scene where he confronts his former co-worker in his restaurant, and the monologue that he gives is amazing writing, amazing acting. And for this movie to work as well as it does, it relies on Nicolas Cage's performance, and like I said, he sells it and makes the movie work. Besides that, it's just kind of simple, the structure, and it doesn't really go anywhere beyond what you expect at the beginning, but like I said, the performance is really what sells this movie. I didn't love this movie, but I think it was really good, and I'll definitely probably return to it at some point. Like I said, best scene of the year. And I really appreciated the culinary aspect of this movie. You don't see that very often. Maybe in something like My Name is Chef, but in this film, they do a really good job of incorporating the culinary world and sort of honing in on that feeling in this movie. All right, let's talk about Riders of Justice, the next film on the list. This is a quirky, sort of oddball Scandinavian comedy starring Mads Mikkelsen. He does a great job, one of the best performances of the year. This is just a fun little comedy. It's got action aspects, lots of sort of sad plot elements that are actually very cleverly and well integrated into the film. They didn't really detract from the comedy bits. Yeah, this is a good Danish film. Yeah, I'd recommend this. It's good. It's not some sort of work of high art, but it's got lots of good aspects. And it's also kind of a Christmassy movie, too. I just remembered that. Let's talk about another Scandinavian film up next on the list. That would be Lamb, starring Noomi Rapace. This is a very hard one to recommend because it's kind of difficult to enjoy if you don't really like slow movies. The slow pacing of this film is very intentional and methodical, though. I will say, very meticulous setups and payoffs. If you wait it out and get through the harder aspects of the film to get through, you will be rewarded in the end. Let me tell you, this film is really weird. The nature of the film itself and what the plot revolves around is bizarre, but it's well done. The way that they handle how this film's plot goes is done in a way that it does not really alienate you as an audience member. There's just enough to keep you kind of invested and be like, with like a confused sort of look on your face, just kind of pondering what's going on. And then, like I said, they really, really make it work at the end. The plot twist at the end, which I won't spoil, but this plot twist has a sort of tone shift quality to it, where the movie kind of changes from a drama, whatever it is, to a horror movie, I guess, in like the last 15 minutes. And my God, it was awesome. One of the most satisfying moments of the year. I had my jaw drop from the revelation on screen. If you watch the movie, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you have seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, because it's the most important scene of the movie. The performances by the animals in this film as well is an aspect to mention. There's a lot of really fun and unique animal reaction shots. They get these very unique close-ups on the animals' faces. I loved that. That was really cool. The cat and the dog especially had these awesome faces. Lots of aspects to analyze about this film. I really liked the symbolism and sort of questions that it calls to mind with what the ending suggests. I was left to ponder a lot of it immediately after watching it. So yeah, this is a good recommendation from my end. Just like keep in mind, it's very intentionally slow paced and it's a hard one to get into. And I recognize that a lot of people didn't really like it, but I did. It's great. I know that the trailer was incredibly misleading for this film. When I saw the trailer for this before another film that I'm going to mention, the movie was nothing like that. So I would say that the way that they sell it should not have been the way that they sold it. The way I just described it, let that be your trailer. Here's another film that a lot of people probably haven't seen or talked about or done anything about, and that would be Oxygen, directed by Alexandre Aja. Alexandre Aja has done films that I've absolutely hated, including Piranha 3D. I thought that was one of the worst movies I'd ever seen in my life. But then this movie came along, and I actually do really like his remake of The Hills Have Eyes. I think that is a really, really solid, hardcore horror film from the early 2000s. But this is probably his best movie. A lot of that relies on the performance of Mélanie Laurent from Inglourious Basterds. She's great in that movie, and she's excellent here. This is a solid thriller. It's legitimately tense. The directing in this film is great. You have a very clear setup from the beginning, and it ropes you in, and it really doesn't let go of the tension at all. The movie feels like it's about 30 minutes long. I think it has probably the best jump scare in a film that I've seen in ages. It legitimately, got to me. I've never had that, sort of sledgehammer to the heart sort of feeling from a jump scare in a while, and that impressed me a lot. This is a film that has a unique twist on the trapped in one spot premise. It goes in directions you never expect. So don't look at anything about this movie. Don't even watch a trailer before watching it. Just let the acting performance and my description of how good and well directed it is sell you on it, because I think it is impressive, this film. Like I said, the plot twists are effective. It goes in directions you don't even see coming. Yeah, this is great. I know it'll never happen, but Mélanie Laurent, I think, honestly was Oscar-worthy in this movie. Oh boy, here is one that I have been dying to discuss. That is The Empty Man. This is the most unique movie of the year. Really, really solid horror film. One of my favorite, most unique, creative films that's come out in the past couple of years. I know it came out in 2020, technically, but it was basically the hype and buzz around it in the cult film community kind of only happened in this year, so I'm counting it as a film released in 2021. There's a lot of really memorable horror sequences in this movie. Again, this is one, I think, if you just go into it blind, not really knowing what the plot of the film is, you will have a much better experience watching it and just seeing how the twists sort of unfold and unravel before your eyes. I would describe this movie as a tonal mix of John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, Exorcist 3, and Kill List. It's like a weird sort of mixture of all four of those movies with some hints of like science fiction thrown in there too. I think Jay Bauman from Red Letter Media, shout out Red Letter Media. I can't not go into this video without giving them a shout out, you know?
Why are you doing this to me?
Good night, sweet cats.
All you're doing is making this harder and harder.
I think he described it as the film kind of changes into a different movie like every 20 minutes, and that is a perfect way of describing it in a good way. The structure of the film is great too. It really doesn't let up in its pacing for the entirety of its 2.5-hour runtime, and that is impressive because for a movie to be that long and change things up as many times as it does, and still stay consistently really, really strong and great is an accomplishment. And the director, first timer, he has really wowed me and impressed me with the effort put on display here. Another aspect to mention is the sound design. The sound effect that sort of continues to crop up throughout the movie in like the scary sequences. It kind of reminded me of like how the Sting sound effect is used in the original Halloween film. I'll play the sound now. That sound is like, whenever I think of this movie, I think of that sound, and like for the sound association to be so clear and so well done, that's another accomplishment. I've never seen a film do that like that well, and it's a haunting sound. It's like it's legitimately really kind of creepy, and it's all throughout the soundtrack and stuff. Also, my God, the soundtrack in this movie, Christopher Young, one of the most underrated soundtrack composers. Dude did the soundtrack, I believe, for Drag Me to Hell and for Hellraiser, and both of those movies' soundtracks are amazing, and this one is too. So you can tell I just really like this movie. I would definitely recommend this one. It's just great. All right, The Suicide Squad is up next. This is James Gunn at his game, just like perfectly doing what he does best. It's just a really, really fun script. What to say about it? I mean, it's just really, really a funny movie. That is what it comes down to for me. If the film had not been as funny as it was, it would not have worked. But it was just the way that they set up these characters, how clever a lot of the scripting choices were. Excellent. One of the things I really liked about it, that I dug about the script and the characters, was how humorous they are from just their appearance and what they do and whatnot. But they're not complete farces. They have nuance to them. They have little dramatic sort of story beats to their character arcs, and that was done well. And I think that the acting performances, especially Idris Elba as the straight man amongst these kind of goofier characters like King Shark and Harley Quinn, Idris Elba did a great job. And I think Harley Quinn has been annoying to me in other movies that she's been in. I haven't even seen like Birds of Prey, but that movie just looked obnoxious. But Harley Quinn here is really fun. She has a lot of stuff to do. She gets like her own sort of subplot by herself until she meets up with the others later on in the movie, and that was all fun. The opening of this movie was great too, how they kind of misled you. I loved that. And the ultra violence. I mean, it's just great. Like, just getting to see like people's heads blown up and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just something inherently fun about seeing that kind of stuff in a movie like this where it's not super serious. This was a huge improvement on the previous Suicide Squad movie, and in fact, I hate that that movie is called Suicide Squad, because now this one being so similarly titled, it's like, why couldn't just one exist? This one, you know? All right. We're moving quickly through this list. We're up to another really, really good one. This is The Green Knight. Really just sort of an interesting take on the King Arthur legend. Cinematography in this movie is beautiful. That goes without saying. But I think more impressive to me were the uses of sound in this movie. Like, there was some sequences in this that were like, holy shit, the sound was awesome. I'm thinking in particular of the scene when the Green Knight speaks.
O greatest of kings, indulge me in this friendly Christmas game. Let whichever of your knights is boldest of blood and wildest of hearts step forth, take up arms, and try with honor to land a blow against me. Whomsoever nicks me shall lay claim to this my arm. Its glory and riches shall be thine. But thy champ must bind himself to this. Should he land a blow, then 1 year and Yuletide hence he must seek me out yonder, to the Green Chapel, 6 nights to the north. He shall find me there and bend a knee and let me strike him in return, be it a scratch on the cheek or a cut in the throat. I will return what was given to me, and then in trust and friendship we shall part. Who then? Who is willing to engage with me?
The color in this film is also impressive. I think of the just vast uses of yellow and green and red and brown that just made these sequences where Gawain was going through the countryside so much more visually interesting than what you would expect from a movie like this. That aspect of the film was handled just insanely well. Yeah, there's a lot of unique and interesting scenarios you wouldn't really see in a movie like this that I felt enhanced it, and we have to talk about the ending. The ending is like the most important part of the whole movie. It's what kind of makes the whole movie work. It's very Last Temptation of Christ. I loved the way it delivered. It just delivered. You think the way that it's going, you're like, this isn't gonna work. This is like ineffective. What is the movie doing? You were kind of like thinking to yourself, oh, I hope it doesn't end this way. But then when they pull the rug out from under you at the very end and reveal what they reveal, yes, it's like that is exactly what the filmmakers were intending to do, and it got to me. So big thumbs up for me on the ending. And like I said, this movie was just really, really well done. I loved it. All right, this is probably going to surprise some people to be up this high, but I thought this movie was truly excellent. One of the best theater experiences, you know, probably since the first one. But up next on the list is A Quiet Place 2. I was surprised at the continuation of the first film, the aspect of that in this, where it was literally a continuation of the first film. I thought maybe they'd set this like 3 or 4 years after the first one, but nope. You could watch the first and second one back to back. Yeah, this film is mostly up this high because of how superb the pacing of this was. It felt like it was only like 30 minutes long. When it ended, I was like, oh my god, excellent. John Krasinski, great job. And I think that the tension in this film was also an aspect that is undeniably excellently done. Just the fact that the monsters are still scary in this movie, that they are still as effective in being like keeping you on the edge of your seat as they were in the first one is masterful. I really, really enjoyed that. Twists and turns that the plot took in taking them to this island and stuff like that was awesome. I loved that. The furnace stuff was great too. So yeah, Quiet Place 2. Big recommendation for me. Not as much as the first one, but it's pretty darn close. Okay, next up is The Last Duel. Ridley Scott, you know, he is a master, and this is probably my third favorite movie by him, to be honest. I liked this better than stuff like Thelma and Louise and Gladiator, and those are like considered classics, but this one, to me, hit me harder than those. The pacing in this was great. I loved the twist on the 3-act structure that they were able to pull off with this thing in showing different perspectives as accounting for the first, second, and third acts. That was genius. Like, that was awesome. I think the performances by Jodie Comer and Adam Driver are both Oscar-worthy, especially Adam Driver, who gives maybe one of the best performances of the past 5 years. I've loved Adam Driver in everything he's been in, but this was incredibly effective for me because instead of seeing him in like a anti-hero kind of role or, you know, a lovable loser sort of role like he mainly gets put in, he is just awful here. He is one of the most like hateable, despisable people I've ever seen in a movie. The action sequences are great too. Loved the final battle scene. Yeah, and the look of this film, the way that they're able to sort of capture medieval France was also really well done. And the aspect of the film being the feudalistic nature of the way that they were living back then is also captured very well. I liked that. And the nuanced themes and messages in this movie were particularly well done as well. I thought that it was not preachy at all, and in fact they did a really good job of making the character that experiences something in this film, I'm not going to spoil it, very sympathetic, and the message that they're trying to pull out of this was handled effectively, and you know what, I agree with it. So Last Duel, really, really good movie. Loved it. Wished it had done better at the box office, but what can you do? Really, really, Scott, you did a good job. Get a A+ from me. And let's move on to another amazing movie. I haven't finished watching my stuff this year, like everything. I'm kind of delivering this and filming this before having seen 2 really good movies, or at least supposed really good movies. So if this is number 1 on the list, it's number 1, and that is the pleasure and amazing experience that was Spider-Man No Way Home. And I know, again, like I mentioned earlier in the list, it's Marvel cape shit, but guess what? This worked for me. I loved it. I felt all of the emotional beats in this movie. I was thoroughly enjoying every single thing that was happening. My goodness, this for me was what Avengers Endgame was for most people that saw that film. The emotional beats in this movie just hit every time, and I was loving it. And I think a lot of people will look at a movie like this and think, oh, it's cashing in on nostalgia. You know, it's a movie that is all just wink wink, get the reference kind of stuff, the member-berry kind of movies, like that Space Jam sequel this year. But it really isn't that at all. I mean, yes, it is like a movie that has nostalgia bait in the movie, but it's done in a way that is fresh and engaging. The interactions between these characters from movies that we know already is what makes it work. The fact that Dr. Octopus acts like he did back then in the 2004 Spider-Man 2, in this movie, he feels like he was straight out of that movie. I've seen it put best by Adam from Your Movie Sucks. He said that it is amazing fan fiction, and that's exactly the best way to put it, in a loving sort of way, because this movie is really good, but it is sort of like fan fiction where you just take these characters and have them interact and have these situations together, and it works. Everything about it works. It's just really, really well done. I think the performances in this were great too. Willem Dafoe, Green Goblin. I mean, Willem Dafoe's great in anything he's in, but especially here, Green Goblin, I mean, he pulled off the performance so well. So good, connecting how well he played it here and how well he played it back then, and like the connections between his character and the little sort of tidbits that linked his character from that one and this one. That was great. Nostalgia baiting done well is the best way to describe this. I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. It's the best of the Tom Holland trilogy. And I hope what they do with the ending is that they leave that and don't sort of resolve that in any way. But I'm sure they won't, which will probably piss me off. But you know what? If they don't make another Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, this would be the best send-off. I think they should take some years and give it some time before they do this again, but you know they won't. Tom Holland will probably be back playing this role in 2 years from now. But, you know, I think as much as I like to rag on the MCU and Disney, this one felt to me like it worked. It was something that I enjoyed so much, and I can get over my cadre nature about Marvel movies and enjoy that one for once. So it's definitely my favorite of Marvel movies released in the past like 3 years. One other aspect I'd like to point out, I mean, as great as this movie was, I can't even imagine being like a 7-year-old child and seeing this. I would be so confused. I would be so confused with what was going on. A lot of it has to do with your expectation and reaction to seeing stuff from your childhood appear on screen again. I was like, that thought was crossing my mind as I was watching the movie. I was like, what in the world would a 7-year-old be thinking of this? They'd be like just lost. I'm rambling. As you know, that was my favorite movie of the year, possibly. If I'm saying this and it turns out it's not my favorite movie of the year, then I'm gonna look like an idiot, but who cares? Thank you for watching this year's list. I mean, that's all 40 movies wrapped up and talked about, each in detailed fashion. Hopefully I'll do this again next year, and hopefully maybe I've seen more movies. The 3 people that will watch this video, which 2021 movie did you enjoy the most? So if you've made it this far, comment your favorite character from John Carpenter's The Thing. I don't know if you've seen that movie. Hopefully I will have a couple of videos that will come out this year. I've been kind of thinking about doing. I'll just say that one of them has to do with a great television show, and the other one has to do with a certain musical genius that released an album last year, and he has several albums and several songs, and I've taken the time this past year in getting to know his discography better and ranking all of his songs. So possibly this year I will be making a video ranking every song by Kanye West. Be on the lookout possibly for that. I'm not making any guarantees, but they may be videos that I may end up making. So yeah, and again, thank you for watching, and yeah, that's about it. I don't know what else to say.